Shila Gurudev ki Jai. Shri Sadguru Gauranga ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Sad Goswami Prabhu ki Jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Gaur Premananda. Hari Om. You have place there? You can come closer if you want. Only to change the places and yes. So good evening to all of you. Pranam, and thanks so much for your valuable presence and attention. So today we are continuing with our series of lectures on the contribution of the 6 Goswamis to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Let's make some very brief recap of what we were studying today in the morning, and then the idea is today try to unpack a little bit the content of this Sad Goswami Astakam that we have been just singing some minutes ago, which basically it's a very, in a nutshell, very condensed way of speaking about what are the Goswamis about. So today in the morning, before reaching that, we share some ideas on Srila Rupa Goswami and his contribution among many contributions he made, and according to one verse of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Vrindavaniyam Rasakili Vartam, how Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami made this parallel of Brahma being enlightened in the beginning of creation by Krishna, and then Krishna again in the form of Krishna Chaitanya, enlightened Sri Rupa Goswami, while instructing him, empowering him to become many things, the head of the Sampradaya in many ways, the Rasa Acharya, the Avideya Acharya, Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And as we mentioned in the words of Srila Prabhupada, Srila Rupa Goswami's mission has been to establish the feelings, the emotions of Sri Chaitanya Dev in the form of a practice that we can take advantage of. And so that's a very unique notion, how to make a whole discipline out of an emotional overflowing volcanic eruption that we call Sriman Mahaprabhu. And in order to do so, of course, and in order to speak what was Mahaprabhu about, what was his experience about, Rupa Goswami, among other things, he depicted a unique conception of God, of the Absolute, in terms of rasa, God as aesthetic experience, God as condensed beauty and surrounded by all those qualities that can engage all our emotional makeup, if you will, in the most perfect and consuming way. And in that context, he also wrote many, many books from the very beginning describing what's the definition of bhakti for us, Gaudiyas. Of course, we didn't go into detail for that. That's another retreat in UK. Maybe you can come to all of you with me and we can speak about Anyavilasita Sunyam Gan Karmadyanabdam Anukulyana Krishna Silana Bhakti Ruttama. Only that verse that Srila Rupa Goswami mentions. This is the idea of bhakti for us, Uttam Bhakti, that needs some lifetimes of unpacking, and no problem. We have no rush, and we have eternity to try to appreciate his contribution. Also, we mentioned besides all his high ideals and dramatic writings and the depiction of the absolute in terms of beauty and art and rasa, Srila Rupa Goswami was also a very pragmatic personality which knew how to deal with the times he was living in, with the social sensibilities, with the different currents of thought and culture surrounding the very forming of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, and very expertly he had this, as we spoke yet today, very specific and detailed focus inner, but externally he was able to embrace in a universal spirit things like Muslim culture, and let's make them part of the architecture of the Govindaji temple, ecumenical spirit, while at the same time not diluting the intensity of his penetration into transcendence. So we concluded today in the morning with this idea. For us to be Rupa Nugas or followers of Sri Rupa implies also inherit somehow this spirit from him. Not only as much as we progress, become more and more detailed in our focus, but that specificity has to give place to some form of breadth at the same time. Guru Maharaj will speak in terms of the depth and the breadth of Mahaprabhu's dispensation. So the more we advance, the more we should be able to navigate the two waters. Not because in the name of being deep, I become totally fundamentalist and sectarian, and I can only speak with those who are part of my gang, if you will. Or in the name of breadth, I lose sight of the depth of the contribution of Sri Chaitanya and the Goswamis. So basically that's the idea we shared today in the morning, trying to inspire ourselves to be part of Mahaprabhu's mission. We also spoke about what's the mission of Mahaprabhu and how mission can be not only in marble-like terms or in brick-like terms. We have the institution, the hard form of the mission, but also, he agreed with that. But also we have the other form of the mission. What's the mission of Mahaprabhu? The mission of his life, the ideal of his life, the goal he wants to attain, his prayojan. And our mission is assisting him in his mission. And Rupa Goswami is the one who has, as we mentioned, masterminded the mind of his own master, Sriman Mahaprabhu, and established this idea. So that's the most important thing, the ideal, the mission that we have received. Not so much the external form of the mission. The external form of the mission may come and go. Institutions will come and go. So don't, I mean, I'm not condemning institution from tip to toe, but we have to know that there's a relativity to that. But the ideal is what gives life to the institution. Without the ideal, what's an institution? Again, a bunch of bricks and marble that we should sell in order to print more books, as Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta will say. So in some particular time, one institution may present a contribution, another time there's some other necessity, there's a complement and whatever. I mean, some institution may not work at certain time, but the ideal has to keep moving. The ideal has to keep evolving. No matter which is the packaging, it will be delivered through. So that's what Krishna says in the Gita. Sometimes the current gets, how do you say? Like, stuck. Yeah, stuck. The current gets stuck. Was it the technical term for the water being stuck in one place? Okay. Okay. When the water does not flow, we shouldn't be attached. No, the flow water should flow in this way, in this particular current, under the name of this particular river. Let the current flow however it has to flow, but then let the current keep the current alive and flowing. So that's what parampara is about. So again, at least you have to help him in how to put on the back. I take here. I already know because all these days I have been having the same problem. So yeah, you have to put long there and short there. That will work. So yeah, future of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is not necessarily limited to one particular single group or institution that has to do everything for the whole world and the whole Gaudiya Vaishnavas in all the planetary system or something. But maybe in time there may be less groups. Maybe in time there may be smaller groups or less institutions, but more substance in the idea. I don't know. I'm not entering into prophecies mode. But the point is that can happen, and we should be willing to take whatever requires for the ideal to become, continue developing. There's constant unfolding of the ideal of the mission of Mahaprabhu. Srila Maharaj, today someone was asking me, which is one of the favorite things that Srila Maharaj say that I like the most, because they want me to speak about that in the UK or something. So I was thinking, and I didn't have to think too much, because there's one quote that I always like too much. That is like, I don't know, 8 words. So Srila Maharaj will say, and correct me if I'm pronouncing that wrongly in English, but he's saying, we are a means to our ideal. That's grammatically correct? Okay. So that's what we are. If you ask who you are, I'm a means for my ideal. My ideal has to trespass me, like penetrate me, and I have just to be instrumental in that to happen, whatever form it takes. Again, the all important thing is that the ideal may possess me and puppeteer me, make me a puppet. He's can and keep flowing through whatever direction, through whatever people has to flow. So that's the perfection of, I would say, of self-surrender, to offer our individuality in a tasteful way. So the ideal may choose to reveal itself and pass itself through us and continue its flow whenever it has to converge, if you will. So as we spoke today in the morning, the Goswamis books represent a form of trying to give shape to the mission of Mahaprabhu, to the desire of Mahaprabhu, to the ideal of Mahaprabhu, a soft institutionalization of the ecstasy of Sri Chaitanya there. And in time, that soft institutionalization that began with some books became harder and harder in this good sense of the term, more concrete form. Some buildings were there, 64 mats, Gaudiya mat, 108 temples, Srila Prabhupada, and now, well, we have so many things in so many directions, which is great. I mean, it's part of what Mahaprabhu was predicting. But again, sometimes the necessity of the flow may take so many different ways that, because sometimes we may get this, like, how to say, like attached to idealize. Ideally, this should take, for Mahaprabhu's mission to be successful, this should be happening. There should be this much more number of temples, this much more number of, in quantity we may think, but sometimes maybe there's another necessity. There may be some other types of adjustment. We will take our attention and time in the direction of quality over quantity. Sometimes that can happen. I remember Bhakti Balak Tirtha Maharaj once, he said, if you want quality, generally you have to sacrifice quantity. And if you want quantity, generally you have to sacrifice quality. So you choose. I'm not saying black and white. Sometimes there's one thing and the other, but there are different proportions of that as well. I will say nowadays we are the whole Gaudiya Sampradaya and Gaudiya community is in a moment where it's a good moment to go back to the books of the Goswamis, if you will, to become aware of the foundation of our Sampradaya. After some generations of Vaishnavas around the world, it's a good moment, as we were speaking with Tulal Chandra recently, like the best preaching strategy for nowadays is no more preaching strategies. And let's go to know the ultimate conclusions of our Sampradaya, the Siddhantas was established by the 6 Goswamis and so on. So that's an important thing to do. So somehow we are trying to promote that through these meetings amongst the members of different sanghas, so you can extend the epidemics wherever you may go. So today we wanted to share some thoughts. I'm realizing that I've started like 15 minutes later, so I hope Rigopad will change his mudra for a minute. Now I have to do like this because you are the one succeeding. So the idea again is to share some brief thoughts on the Sri Sat Goswami Astakam we just sang, brief ones, because again there's a lot to unpack there. So with your permission, I will briefly go through each one of the verses and we will try to connect some of the contribution of the Goswamis in connection to that. And also you will know the meaning of the song we were singing, because maybe most of you cannot fully follow the Sanskrit, so it's a good way to go there. So Sri Sat Goswami Astakam is an Ashtakam, a composition of 8 Sanskrit verses. Sometimes they have a 9th one with Nasirbat, Falashruti, Nasirbat Shloka. In this case, there are only 8. This is composed by Srinivasacharya, who is one of the main followers of the Goswamis, who was like really the main one, instrumental in the distribution of the books of the Goswamis. So we may call the first traveling Sankirtan party, with Narottam and Srinivas and Yamananda. That's another series of lectures in itself. So he composed this Sat Goswami Astakam, which very, very beautifully narrate and describe the contribution of them. So I will go through the verses quickly. I will go directly to the English and may highlight some of the Sanskrit terms. All of the verses end with the same line as is classical with the Astakams, Bandharupa Sanatana Raghujuva Sri Jiva Gopalako, which means I offer my Vandanam, my prayers, my pranam to Rupa, Sanatan, Raghu, Dugo, Sri Jiva, Gopalako, which means basically the two Raghus, the two Raghunaths, Gopal Bhatta, Jiva Goswami, Rupa, Sanatan, the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. So I'll read the translation in English of each verse, and we will say some words in there. So the first verse says, I worship the six Goswamis, Rupa, Sanatan, Raghunath Das, Raghunath Bhatta, Sri Jiva, and Gopal Bhatta. The last line generally when translating goes to the first place. They are always engaged in chanting the holy name of Krishna and dancing. They are just like the ocean of love of God. And they are popular both with the gentle and with the ruffians, because they are not envious of anyone. Whatever they do, they are all pleasing to everyone. And they are fully blessed by Lord Chaitanya. Thus, they are engaged in missionary activities meant to deliver all the conditioned souls in the material universe. Sad Goswami Prabhu ki. So this is the first verse, which very beautifully depicts the achar of the Goswamis, Krishna Kirtana. To begin with, the first two words are Krishna Kirtana. And so that's what the Goswamis are about. Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paru Premamritam Bodhini. So they're engaged in chanting and dancing. Chanting and dancing. And of course, as we know, their dancing is not just like, okay, let's like make rehearsal of some choreography and we will dance, but their dancing is sattvic bhav. It's like a natural expression of their inner ecstasy. Dancing is one of them. You can dance, out of ecstasy, and you can dance without that much ecstasy. It's okay, you can dance, no problem. We have to begin somewhere. But the dancing of the Goswamis was not at all like, okay, now arms here and now arms there, but just like nobody knew what will happen. As my Guru Maharaj will say, generally we hear Haridas Thakur sang 3 lakhs per day, which is basically 192 rounds. Scary, right? But we never hear how many rounds Rupa Goswami chanted, because they say that generally he started chanting and maybe after half syllable he passed out immediately, collapsed, rolling in the ground, and no more rounds per day. So if you meet Rupa Goswami, please do not ask him how many rounds did he chant today. That half a syllable of the name is much worthy of all the rounds I have chanted till the day of today. So again, it's not about necessarily quantity, but quality. So they are described as Dhira Jana Priyo. So they are dear, they are Priya to Dhira and to Adhira, to the sober and to the unsober, you see? Okay. Or to the gentle and the ruffian. So you can imagine, one thing is, you are dear to the nice people. Okay, they are nice, so they like you. But they are dear to everyone. To the less virtuous, to the more virtuous, it is said that they were an ocean of mercy to everyone. And one important point there, the one important word for us that qualifies further this situation is why they are so dear for them, Nirmatsaru, which the Bhagavatam says similarly. Dharma Prayita Kaita Gotra Paramo. Nirmatsaranam. Nirmatsaranam means they are non-envious. So just by being non-envious, just like if it's something easy. But if you get to be non-envious, basically you become a friend of everyone. That's the whole idea. Envy is that thing that gets in the way of real friendship, real universal friendship. So a non-envious person, in brief words, has no enemies. So they are dear to Dhira and Adhira because they are not making this distinction basically due to being non-envious. They are just seeing in a very generous way, as my Guru Maharaj will say, only the potential of every jiva. Even the worst possible Jagaya Madaya you can imagine. He's called Swami Padmanabha, just in case. They will see such a ruffian only in terms of his or her potential. My Guru Maharaj will say, Mahaprabhu and the Goswamis, by extension, they are not judging us by who we were in the past, what we did, thank God. And they are not judging us for who we are in the present, Thank God. 2 times and 3 times and more. But they are judging, quote unquote, considering us according to who we can be, to what's our potential. They are only seeing us in terms of our brightest future. That's another of my favorite quotes of Srila Siddhar Maharaj. He will say, your future is brilliant. Period. If it comes from the mouth of someone like Srila Siddhar Maharaj, he really feels that, and he really feels that, hopefully you really feel that, because he's saying that to all of us, your future is brilliant. No matter how cloudy is today's sky over your head, your future is brilliant. Try to have a glimpse of the dispensation that has knocked on your door in this lifetime. I mean, it's overwhelming just to think about that. So that's a good exercise. Every time some cloud appears in our Anishtita Bhajana Kriya schedule, remember Srila Samara saying speak into your ear, your future is brilliant. Even today, especially today. And not lose sight of that, because that's the whole problem. We lose sight of the potential, brilliant potential that's waiting for us, and we get discouraged and we get depressed and so on. A very famous philosopher in Argentina, he used to say, you are not depressed, you are distracted. Like when you feel I'm depressed, it means you are paying too much attention in the wrong direction. That's all. You are too much obsessed with distraction. But if you pay attention in the proper direction, the future is brilliant. The brilliant horizon is still there. So this is say here, whatever they were doing was pleasing to everyone because nirmatsaru, they were free from envy. So the Bhagavatam basically makes this idea of nirmatsaranam a synonym with being a sadhu, because it says nirmatsaranam satam. So satam means sadhu. If you want to be a sadhu, that's almost like synonymous with being non-envious. That's an important thing to, like yardstick to say. Where's my sadhness? Where's my non-enviousness? No? And that goes hand by hand, basically. Sri Chaitanya Kripavaro Bhubivugo Bhavarahavantaraku. So Sri Chaitanya Kripavaro is here. So they are fully kripa-sized by Mahaprabhu. They are fully, they have received the full mercy of Sri Chaitanya, in other words. They are empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in a special way. These 6 personalities represent special empowerment of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The 6 Goswamis, we could say, are 6 forms of Mahaprabhu's empowerment. Basically, it's Mahaprabhu himself acting through them, through particular type of empowerment. And in this way, it is said here, therefore they can establish in the world para upakar, greatest charity, greatest what's the word? Welfare work, the welfare work, greatest welfare work possibly. Like Mahaprabhu said, Buridha, Tabakatamritam Taptajivan. They are spreading this current of Harikatha, which is the greatest possible charity the world could know. So Mahaprabhu empowered them, as we mentioned, each one of the Goswamis. Sometimes Rupa Goswami is briefly mentioned. He's the Rasacharya, he's the Abhideyacharya. Sanatana Goswami is the Sambandha Tattvacharya, and we could say the Maryada Acharya, the Acharya of Vaishnava etiquette. He wrote, as we will see maybe tomorrow, Hari Bhakti Vilas. Prabhupada has to give that lecture, not me. Raghunath Das Goswami, he was specially empowered as the Prayojan Tattvacharya, delving deeply into Radha Dasyan, the ultimate reach of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. Gopal Bhatt, as we mentioned, he was specially empowered as the Diksha Guru of the Sampradaya. And Jiva Goswami, as we will speak tomorrow, he was the Tattvacharya of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, the theologian par excellence. And Raghunath Bhatta Goswami was the cook of the Sampradaya and the Bhagavat reader and the anonymous personality. Someone has to do that as well. So all of them were fully empowered by Sri Chaitanya Dev. Let's go to the second verse, which focuses on the on the connection with Shastra to begin with. They are very expert in studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus, they are honored all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of because they are absorbed in the transcendental loving service of the lotus feet of Radha Krishna. Radha Krishna Padara Binda Bhajanandina. Matalika. So this is an important point here also. The Goswamis being Nana Shastra Vichara Naika Nipuna. They are Shastra Nipun. Srila Rupa Goswami himself uses this expression. Shastra Nipun means like scriptural genius, someone who really not only has great intellectual capacity, but has great intuition to see how actually all the revealed text are converging in a particular direction. That's not an easy task to do, as you can imagine, especially when you speak about, with any religious text, but what to speak about the Vedas and the jungle of sounds, as Srila Maharaj will say, so many directions in the different scriptures and chapters and Puranas, Rajasic, Tamasic, Sattvic Puranas, and Itihasa, Vedanta, and Veda, and only with the Bhagavatam you have a good deal of a nice headache to deal with. But the Goswamis in their script, they studied Saddarshan, for example, the 6 philosophical systems in India. Not only they studied their own tradition, they established a tradition, but in order to establish Gaudiya Vaishnavism, in order to themselves writing their own Shastra, which are our foundational Shastras, they went to all these different other traditions, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Karma Mimamsa, Yoga, Vedanta, and they used all the arguments and they dealt with the prevalent opposing currents of thought of the time. And they established Gaudiya Sampradaya in a very Stunanika Nana Nyaya by following this, how is it in English? Pounding the post principle, the maxim of pounding the post, which doesn't mean I will just repeat the same thing over and over again until I make you crazy and you surrender to me. No, because sometimes we understand that pounding the post means I will say Harinam, Harinam, Harinam. That's also useful. No? When you say something 3 times, you will say, oh, why Maharaj is repeating the same thing over and over again. But Stuna Nikanana Nyaya means mostly I will present a point and I will address all the opposing arguments to that point, all the prevalent currents of view that go against my point. I will address them, deal with them, defeat them, if you will, and then reestablish my point with much more power after having nourished myself from the enemy, if you will, quote unquote. No, there are no enemies again. Like the example given. No? Sometimes the lion is walking and the elephant attacks, and the lion kills the elephant and nourishes himself from the flesh of the elephant. No? Something like this. So the obstacles eventually give further power to one's point. So the Goswamis did that expertly. If you really study in detail the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami or many other of the books, they are really taking the time to, they really know in detail all the other currents of thought. So that's an important point that our acharyas also say. Of course, it's enough, it's quite complex to become an expert in your own tradition. But at least if you want to establish a sampradaya, at least if you want to be a guru, for certain people at least who wants to really perform a certain function, they have to be familiar with other currents of thought, especially with those who are prevalent in the time one is dealing with. No? That's what their definition of guru in the Bhagavatam, Sabde Paricha Nishnatam. So the guru should be Shabde Nishnatam, Ampari Nishnatam. So Nishnatam means how is it in English? Like drenched. Thank you. So the guru should be drenched into Shabde and Pare. So Pare, Shabde means the knowledge of scripture, theoretical knowledge of scripture. The guru should be drenched in that. That means Nipuna, Shastra Nipuna. And Pare should have realization of that theoretical knowledge as well. Should walk the talk, basically, for his discourse, her discourse to have real power. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments in this famous verse. To be expert in scripture also means not only devotional scriptures, but other books as well. So that's an important point that my Guru Maharaj likes to emphasize. Sometimes the Guru has to be familiar with current, like present currents of thought, which may have nothing to do with Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but which are the prevalent ways of dealing with reality. And if you want to speak to the world, you have to somehow be familiar with that to speak a similar language, to give proper examples and so on. So the Goswamis were. And when I say the Goswamis were expert in that, somehow means we should become expert in that as much as we want to represent them. If you tell me I don't want to represent the Goswami, okay, that's your idea. But if you want to represent them, that has some implication. And of course, there are levels of representation, but we have to understand they were willing to do this. So they established the ultimate essence of Shastra and show how all Shastra converges in one point, Tattu Shamambayat, like the Vedanta said. You have to understand all this jungle of Vedic sounds in context. It seems that it's totally like pointing in hundreds of directions, but by proper understanding of it, it goes in one single direction. It all converges in this one point, or these two syllables, as we all say, like to say, Krishna, Krishna. All the jungle of sounds are finding final shelter there. And therefore, they are totally honored by everyone. By mercy here, Lokanath Hitakari, all this trouble that they took, if you will, studying all these books and writing all these books. I mean, when you read the books of the Goswami, one of the things you will think is, this takes time. I mean, this is not just, because sometimes we will think, no, they just sat and opened well, there were no books at the time. They took the palm leaves or whatever, and full samadhi, like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Ujjwal Nilamani, Sat Sandarbha. It doesn't work like that. I mean, there's work, effort, edition, not correction of the text. It's not that just trance samadhi, because sometimes we idealize it. Okay, they are need to see this. That means they just press the button and the book was there or something. Now, revelation came and there was no effort required, and it's not like that. There's a lot of things that we have to appreciate. So they did that with full compassion. That's the thing in this verse. Lokanam hitakar, they really were driven by universal compassion. Because again, they are representing the very personality of compassion, Audarya, Sriman Mahaprabhu, Mahavadanya Avatar. And therefore, Tribhuvane Manya Saranya Karo. They are the worthy shelter for the three worlds. You can imagine. I mean, these 6 village girls in Braj appearing as Goswamis, they have the potential to shelter the whole creation. One may say, oh, that's Pushpita Bachana, that's flowery words and that poetry, but they have that capacity in potential. They have that capacity because they have that compassion. Have compassion means I have the willingness to host you, to receive your condition and deliver you basically with the highest type of blessing. So, Tat Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Third verse. Hopefully we'll reach the 8th. Mandarupa Sanatanara Gujugo Sri Jiva Gopalako. These Goswamis that I worship, they are very expert in the description of Sri Chaitanya's divine qualities. They are endowed with the wealth of faith and can purify all conditioned souls from the reactions of their sins with transcendental songs about Govinda. As such, they are very expert in increasing the limits of the ocean of transcendental bliss, and they save all the living entities from the devouring mouth of liberation. So very nice. Here it is saying, they are very expert. Sri Gauranga Gunanu Varna Navidho. Expert in describing the qualities of Mahaprabhu, and as we said the other day. But they are not speaking about Mahaprabhu too much. So in which way they are very expert in doing that. So what's their expertise? They are mostly describing the attributes of Sri Radha and Krishna in such a way that you will start to wonder, where is Mahaprabhu? They are taking you yourself by the hand to you yourself start to make the question yourself. They are not asking you, where is Mahaprabhu? They speak about Radha and Krishna in such a way that you ask yourself, where is Mahaprabhu? Which was the name of the system that Socrates had in Greece, that they take the person to reach their own themselves.
Meiotic system.
Meiotic, yeah, thank you. So it's a form of meiotic in this way, no? Like they are not saying Mahaprabhu and this is Mahaprabhu, but they're speaking of Radha and Krishna, some Parokshabad, some indirect description in such a way that you, where is Gauranga? There has to be a Gaur Lila. It cannot end like this. My Guru Maharaj will say boldly, without Gaur Lila, Krishna Lila is a failure. Because Krishna himself is feeling there is something lacking here. I need a whole new Lila in order to fulfill this desire that came in the height of Krishna Lila. So again, the Goswamis are describing expertly the qualities of Mahaprabhu. Expertly in this case means indirectly, in a suggested way, that in such a way that we ourselves will reach that conclusion naturally. That's a point we'll have to reach someday, and we have to pray for that realization. That realization, we will realize really between Mahaprabhu and Krishna, there is no difference. The diversity is there, but the unity is foundational to that diversity as well. Shraddha Samriddhi and Vito, they are endowed with divine faith, with divine trust and conviction. And therefore, Papo Tapa Nikrintano, they can purify all conditioned souls. Tanu Britam, Govinda Ganamrita. They are purifying all of them through what? Through Govinda Gana, to the nectar of Amrita, to the nectar of songs about Govinda. And so they are delivering so many compositions, so many shlokas, stotrams, Stavamalas, Stavavali, and so on. So many songs. If you analyze all the contribution of the Goswami, one of the main contributions were so many poetry. They gave so much. And we can be delivered by all sins through singing. That's basically our process. And of course, it doesn't end there. No, the whole goal of singing and this divine gun and these divine songs is not just being free from sin, but Anandam Buddhi Vardhanaika Nipuno. There's like some paraphrasing of Shikshastakam here. Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. So they themselves are the personification of this. Anandam Buddhi Vardhanaika, again, Nipuno. Nipuno meant what? Remember?
Expert.
Yeah, expert, genius, someone very capable of Anandam Buddhi Vardhanaika, of increasing the tidal waves of Ananda, basically. The ocean of Ananda starts to overflow by their churning, basically. They are very expert on that through their own song, through their own presentation. Kaivalya Nishtarako, just in case they are saving you from Sayujana. We have to mention that as Gaudiya. Somehow or other. Kaivalya Nishtarako. They are really, again, throwing us in another way into an ocean of personhood, basically, of individuality in the context of loving devotion. Therefore, we offer our pranam to the six Goswamis. Fourth verse, I worship them, the six Goswamis, who renounced all association of aristocracy. Another important point. In order to deliver the poor conditioned souls, they accepted loincloths, treating themselves as mendicants, but they are always merged in the ecstatic ocean of the gopis' love for Krishna and bathe repeatedly in the waves of that ocean. So, as we know, most of the Goswamis were living very, materially speaking, opulent life, aristocratic background. Even those who were not of high birth, like Raghunath Das Goswami, in the consideration of Varnashram, he was living like a deva, basically, like in a palace and a very aristocratic, opulent family. So all of them, because again, one thing is to become a Babaji and go to Vrindavan out of frustration because you never were successful in material life. No? I mean, that's relatively easy. Another thing is you become a Goswami being an aristocratic fellow, millionaire. You follow. I mean, if I tell you I'm living under a tree, why? Because I don't have money to buy a house. That's one thing. But another thing is I have 3,000 houses, but I chose to live under a tree. It's like, wow. The next question is why? For sure. Why that detachment? No, of course, Mahaprabhu loves detachment in a particular way. Mahaprabhu Bhakta Ganet Bhairagya Pradam Jaha Krishna Hoy Gaura Bhagavan. Mahaprabhu is very keen to Vairagya. But the Vairagya of Mahaprabhu's devotees, the renunciation of Mahaprabhu's devotees, counts as a natural byproduct of Raga. Vairagya means a special type of Raga. Vairagya, Vishishta Raga. Special type of attachment, that's called in Sanskrit detachment. Over and over again, we have this type of ideas like viraha. Viraha, generally we translate separation. But viraha also can mean a special type of union, which called union and separation. So detachment actually for us means a special type of attachment that naturally takes you to exhibit some form of detachment in other direction. So this was the standard of the Goswamis. Karunaya Kopina Kanta Shrito. So they themselves were themselves with loincloth, a kopin. That was their main cloth. They slept here and there without fixed residence, basically, and show an extreme vairagya. But again, not vairagya for vairagya's sake, but they were burning with attachment, passionate, sacred, passionate love for Krishna. And that's the next line. When they speak about the vairagya, and it comes Gopi Bhava Rasamritabdi Lahari Kalola Magna Muhur. Why they were such a renunciants? Because they were thrown diving into the ocean of Gopi Bhava. They were burning with lolam, with transcendental greed. And that took them to show natural indifference for the world. They were not even aware of that. That's the real idea of that. For us as bhaktas, our vairagya is just like, should be a natural byproduct of our raga, of our attachment. Like, for example, I always say to the devotees, if you are in Krishna Janmashtami, and generally we fast till midnight, but you don't have the capacity to absorb yourself in all the things that you should be absorbing that day, and the whole day you are mostly watching the clock and dreaming about the 108 preparations that will be offered to you at midnight, better you eat something, and be more focused in what you should be more focused, basically. Because I'm not saying that as an excuse to, okay, great, Maharaj giving blessing for that. But the point is, what's the very purpose of that? So the idea is, for example, Ekadashi. In Ekadashi, there is certain fasting. There are varying degrees of fasting, but ideally the highest degree of fasting it comes as a natural byproduct of your absorption in what the Ekadashi is about, which is a positive focus in dedicating yourself to bhajan that day, to such a point, Silas Maharaj will say that, oh, I forgot to eat and to drink. And the day passed. Oh, okay, nirjal. That's the type of nirjal. Not so much that every time you see like a glass of water, you enter like in Pavlov experiment and you start like this. Something like that. So that was the standard of the Goswamis. Their vairagya was not think about. It was just there. They were not even aware of that because they were really immersed in this Gopi Bhava Rasamritabdi, this ocean of Gopi Bhava. Fifth verse. They are always engaged in worshiping Radha and Krishna in the transcendental land of Vrindavan, where there are beautiful trees full of fruits and flowers which have under their roots all valuable jewels, and where there are many peacocks, cranes, swans, and cuckoos. The Goswamis bestow upon the living entities the ultimate goal of life. And so here is a very nice description of Rajadam, the place where the Goswamis reside, both as sadhakas, perfected sadhakas, and both in their siddha swarups in Vrindavan. Because as Rupa, Sanatan, and so on, they were sent to Vrindavan. That's why they are known as the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. There's some reason for that, because they were living there. They were sent them by Mahaprabhu to establish the whole Sampradaya, as we know, our superheroes, and as my Guru Maharaj will say, for us, the main followers of Sri Chaitanya, because many of the other associates of Sri Chaitanya, they were really quite, maybe some of them at least, quite eccentric or less orthodox into how to behave as a sadhaka. Ramananda Roy teaching the Devadasis to sing for Jagannath and entering into some contact there or whatever. Pundarik Vidyanidhi with a big, how do you say? Hookah. Yeah. Pipe, you say in English?
Water pipe.
Yeah, whatever. So, I mean, we are not to follow that. There are, from a particular, we need Nityananda Prabhu, Dwadasa Gopals uprooting trees and dancing with Bengal tigers and whatever. But the Goswamis were really into showing what a sadhaka, ideal sadhaka should be like. So in that sense, they established for us an example we can follow. An example we can follow. So where we are. So Vrindavan described here. So they are living in Vrindavan again. Mahaprabhu asked them, please go to Vrindavan. At that time, it is said Vrindavan was mostly like a forest. I mean, Vrindavan is a forest. Nowadays, it's more a city than a forest. It's Vrindapuri more than Vrindavan. But at that time, it was more like a forest, like a jungle, basically. Practically, there were no temples. There were no certain systematic approach to bhajan in the context of our sampradaya. So the Goswamis were there, of course, before Lokanath Goswami was there, Bhugarva Goswami was there, some of sometimes known as 7th, 8th Goswamis were there. But the Goswamis were there and Mahaprabhu asked them, establish temples, establish the worship of Thakurji there, write books that will delineate the practice of bhakti in our tradition, and show the example, ideal example to all devotees who follow. So here the description of Vrindavan basically concentrates how this Brajadam is full of kalpa vrikshas who would provide all the necessities. And interestingly here it is saying, under the roots of the trees, they are full of valuable jewels. Like implying the Aishwarya is not explicit there. No? No? All this Vrindavan has Aishwarya as a foundation, but it's not in the forefront, you say, but it's on the background, underlying, allowing the Madhurya to happen. But the interesting thing, as my Guru Maharaj will say, in Vrindavan, there's much more Aishwarya even than in Vaikuntha. Every tree is a kalpa vriksha, every cow is kamadenu, the land is chintamani. But the most Aishwaric thing, if you will, the greatest opulence there is the love of the Brajavasis, which take them to not ask anything from all these unlimited sources. They are not asking, oh, the land is chintamani, I want this, I want this, I want that, I want that. There comes a kamadenu. Let's milk her. Everything we want. Oh, kalpa vriksha. We heard there are some valuable jewels. Let's uproot the kalpa vriksha to find the valuable jewels, whatever, anything, nothing. They don't want anything. Or maybe they want something. They may want some fruits, some flowers to offer in service to Krishna. But even if they want that, it's not for them. And since it's not for them, they do not even need to ask that to the tree. No. It is said that naturally, if they need and they want some flowers, some fruits for offering to Krishna, the trees themselves will give the flowers, give the fruits. So everything is working automatically there, flowing automatically. Some problem, Brigopad? Okay, just in case. Few minutes and we are there. So let's continue. But there's a nice description here of how the Goswamis, again, as Goswamis lives in Braj, but eternally as Manjaris, they also live in Braj. So in every sense, they are the Goswamis of Vrindavan. They are of Vrindavan. 6th verse. They are engaged in chanting the holy names of the Lord and bowing down in a scheduled measurement. You emphasize that in your Manasiksha lecture, I remember. In this way, they utilize their valuable lives, and in executing these devotional activities, they conquered overeating and sleeping and were always meek and humble enchanted by remembering the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Yeah, that goes on. So very nicely here, showing again their example as sadhaka, Sankhya Purabhuka. They are chanting a fixed number. Although sometimes they may try, but again, as we mentioned, it may not happen, but they are giving that. And especially Namagana Nativihi. Nativihi means, and I remember, I appreciate Brigupad's point he made in his Nana Siksha series, that the offering of obeisances on a daily basis in a particular number of times, unfortunately, in most of the cases, it has been lost in our Gaudiya tradition as part of our daily sadhana. And generally, we have these numbers for, I'll chant this amount of rounds, but we don't have, I will offer this amount of obeisances per day, which is, as we can see here, part of the Goswamis sadhana. And the Goswamis are the ones who are there of establishing the standard to follow as a sadhaka. So it's never late to go back and bring that back to our practice. At least you can start with one if you want, but we have to begin somewhere. And I remember first time I went to Vrindavan and I saw these sadhus offering, doing Dandavat Parikram to Govardhan. And this Dandavat Parikram, that they will put one Govardhan Shila and go back, same Dandavat in the same place, second Shila, and 108 times and one step. So you can be shocked by seeing that, or you can be really like intrigued, like why they're doing that. Clearly nobody's paying them. They don't have a Patreon website. And someone is supporting each one of their 108 downloads per day or something. So what's taking them to take that travel? Because it's not comfort zone, I can tell you. And I start to make numbers, how much this takes for them to finish the whole parikram, because they're circumambulating the whole hill. It's not that, okay, during the day, let's see where I end. No, I have to finish the whole thing. And that will take years, probably. And again, this has to do, I'm not saying from tomorrow, we have to start in that standard, but this is the same idea. And my point is how much insight they must have receiving by doing that. Even though externally it seems just like a mechanical thing, up, down, up, down, up, down for years, something is coming to them, because if not, they wouldn't be doing that. No, but they are not trying to take your attention. You realize they are really into their own thing. I don't remember the name actually of one Christian author, but it's a very interesting book. And he went to live to the monastery, old Christian monasteries, and he received the service, interesting seva, of Nativihi. The temple president, let's say, told him, your services, you have to go to the door outside of the monastery and to offer obeisances to every person that crosses your path. That's what you have to do. So he wrote a book after some years of only doing that for years, about all the realizations that came to him by just doing that. And it's like, wow, and this person is a sage, a mystic, and only by doing that, of course, with the proper attitude. But the point is, there's a potential in this offering of obeisances. So at least when we do that once a day, Banchakalpataruvista, hopefully we are not doing like just like, oh yeah, now it's the moment of aerobics. No, my head to the ground, and I go down, and I go up and up. Sometimes I see the devotees saying like, Jai Banchakalpa. No, Banchakalpa. That's not Banchakalpa. Banchakalpa means desired tree. What does it mean? Desired tree. My point is, this very substantial thing, we can make them just like a superficial slogan that has no meaning to us. And that's mostly part of niyama graha, that other thing, something that we follow without understanding why we are doing that. And Rupa Goswami said, that will ruin your bhakti. So be careful. So they were really engaged in this way, bowing down a scheduled measurement. So that's a very interesting idea. We can try it. And in this way, it is said they conquered over sleeping and eating. So try to imagine to conquer these very, like, how to say, like instinctive human impulses. Conquer sleep. And we were speaking about this these days, how it would be interesting to just sleep 2 hours per day and we can maximize hopefully, our daily time, because we can say that, but when you have 6 extra hours, you have to know what to do with that also. I remember speaking with one devotee recently, and he told me, "Oh, Maharaj, now I'm starting to work 3 less hours per day. So I have 3 more hours per day." And I didn't want to say great or be careful, no, because great if you do that properly, but if not, you can just lose yourself and get more distracted. And so it's not so easy. I mean, you have nothing to do, just practice bhajans. You have to have certain insight for that. So the Goswamis were conquering eating and sleeping, and of course the point is all the time and energy that they were not investing in that direction, they were investing more and more in their practice. And interestingly, here it says they were extremely meek and humble, because imagine you conquer eat and sleep, you can become kind of puffed up. You can imagine uploading to their Instagram, "I've conquered eat and sleep." I don't think so. Just by putting that, someone will comment. Something else needs to be conquered yet. So this is the contrast in the Goswami. They were totally self-controlled personality. They were Goswamis. That's the very meaning of Goswami. Do not try to make less of the word. I mean, it strictly means you control your impulses. Manas, Krodha, and so on. Rupa Goswami made that very clear. You want to converse in the last verse of Upadishamrita, Radha Kund, and so on, don't gossip first. He says that. The same thing that Mahaprabhu said to Raghunath Das Goswami. Gramya Katana Sunivi Gramya Vartana. Yeah, then Braja Lila Manasa Karib. Yeah, we will in your mind serve Radha and Krishna, but first, please, do not be a gossip man, gossip lady. And as much as you still engage in that, you won't be able to engage in this other thing. But they were, Swamis were, how say, impeccable in their self-control and impeccable in their humility. Okay, that's the real definition of humility Sanatana Goswami mentions. It means when you really have all the good qualities and reasons to be proud, but you are not. Because again, you can be humble while having nothing. Again, you can wear a coping because you have bad karma financially, and that's relatively easy. But to be an aristocratic person and wear a coping, that's another thing. To have all qualities and be meek and humble, that's another thing. So they had all this. Sat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. 7th verse. They stayed sometimes on the bank of the Radhakund pond, or the Radhakund, or the shores of the Jamuna, sometimes in Banshivat. No fixed residence. That's the point. They appeared just like madmen in the full ecstasy of love for Krishna, exhibiting different transcendental symptoms in their bodies, and they were merged in the ecstasy of bhakti. So again, sometimes you will see them in Radhakund, sometimes they will be seen on the shores of the Jamuna, sometimes they will be seen sleeping under Bamsivat, implying they didn't have a fixed place, even though they established this incredible temples, Radha Govinda, Radha Mohan. They were wandering here and there like madmen. That's the idea. They were just wandering. And now the next verse we will go kind of complements wandering, doing what? Looking for someone, inquiring, crying, calling, crying out, as we will see in the next verse. So let's go to the last verse in connection with this, who says how the Goswamis were calling, here Adi Braja Devike, and so on. Chalalite Nanda Suna Kuta. Kuta, 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 Kuta. Kuta means where? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? The Goswamis never say generally, I've seen them. I have them. They are mine. But mostly they show this intense example of separation. Where is Krishna? Where is Sri Radha? And so on. They were loudly calling everywhere in Vrindavan. Queen of Vrindavan, Radharani, O Lalita, O son of Nanda Maharaj, where are you all now? Are you just on the hill of Govardhan, or are you under the trees on the bank of the Jamuna? Where are you? These were their moods in executing bhakti. I offer my respectful obeisances unto these 6 Goswamis. So this is part of the contribution of the Goswami, this particular emphasis in the principle of vipralamba or viraha or separation, and how separation in unto itself, that's a long topic, and Rupa Goswami very nicely developed that in his Ujjwal Nilamani, but how separation unto itself is not just something that will enhance the experience of union, but he himself mentioned that's a rasa unto itself, interestingly, and a form of union in particular, very unique form of union. So the Goswamis were relishing this type of divine madness, running here and there on the ground of Vrindavan and rolling here and there and crying and calling and desperate in the spirit of trying to offer some service to their Ishtadev. Now there's this, let me conclude with one famous story where Srila Rupa Goswami, as you may know, he was really crying loudly, hoping for the darshan of his or her, in this case, as Rupa Manjari, her Swamini, Sri Radha. So he was crying and crying and crying. And also he knew Srila Sanatan Goswami is coming to visit. So at one point he was having the wish to prepare some kheer. Kheer means like sweet rice for offering to Sanatan Prabhu, but he didn't have the ingredients. So at one point, one village girl came there with all the ingredients for the preparation and so on. So Rupa Goswami accepted them. Actually, they were not ingredients, but the kheer in itself being prepared. So Rupa Goswami accepted this kheer and offered that to Sanatan Goswami when he came. So Sanatan Goswami tasted this. He went mad in ecstasy and asked Rupa Goswami, but who prepared this? And he said, one village girl came recently and brought this to me. How she was. I mean, we know this type of visits that the Goswami had. So the point is they concluded it was our Swami, it was our mistress, Radha. And interestingly, instead of celebrating that, Sanatana Goswami started to chastise Rupa Goswami because we are here to serve her, not to allow her to serve us. And she took all this travel to come here. Radhakund was so hot. She brought all this stuff. She's serving us. We are only to serve her. Why you're doing this? This type of pastime. Similarly, I don't know, the famous example of Raghunath Das Goswami absorbing bhajan in Radhakund under the heat of the sun. And there's this famous pastime where Sri Radha herself comes and puts her veil on the head of Raghunath Das Goswami so the sun is not so heavy on him. And Sanatan Goswami again sees that and chastises Raghunath Das Goswami. We are creating so much trouble to our Ishwari. He has to serve us. You have to go to a Bhajan Kutir. At that time, Raghunath Das Goswami was not staying anywhere. So that at that time, it started the tradition of Bhajan Kutir. Because in order to render proper seva and to avoid being rendered seva by one's object of service. So in this way, the Goswamis were totally obsessed, if you will, in divine madness, in divine love with this idea of this notion of exclusive favorable service and not being served in any single way. So all this has to do with their contribution and all, again, that contribution is not just to say, oh, how nice, Goswami Ki Jai, but how their contribution transformed myself to the point of getting closer and closer to what they are about. Not imitating them, because that may be dysfunctional for most. Just do not try to do copy paste of their standard. But I mean, at the same time, that has to touch my heart on some level and create some transformation in one degree or another. So that's part of the commitment of coming to this series these days, just in case you thought it was for free. It is not. So the commitment is basically a sense of responsibility towards myself. Now I'm hearing all this stuff. It's not just a nice story in one song book that I will sing once every year or something, but it has to have some repercussion in my daily bhajan. If I continue with my life as if nothing, after if the Goswamis do not exist, or their contribution has nothing to do with my necessity, still we need to hear these lectures again or something, or expand our series of lectures. So some ideas we want to share today more in the context of discussing some thoughts on Sri Sad Goswami Astakam. We are almost on time, a little bit more, but I have 3 minutes if anyone has some related question or non-related question, but somehow related to the Goswami, we can. Yeah.
Yeah, you were speaking about feelings and dealing with the reality.
Again, sorry?
You were speaking about feelings and dealing with the reality.
Mm.
So I was kind of thinking how much we should care about the bigger community, like in order to like make our heart soft. If we just like close our eyes and ears and heart from the bad things happening around us, so can our heart like stay soft for Krishna only, or can it stay open for Krishna only?
Mm-hmm.
If you can get what I'm trying to say.
I think so, yeah. When you speak about the situations are in the community, you mean
also
in the world,
but also humanity, like both.
Okay, yeah, there
like
are
all kinds of community.
Degrees of community, yeah, and in everyone there is some mess going on as usual. Yeah, of course, in one sense we should understand how to do that, because again, in the name of being compassionate in every direction, we should do that in such a way that is sustainable for us, and we do not go like paranoid, because sometimes we may not have the capacity of dealing with every single mess that is going on every layer of reality, and you may end up in a madhouse or something trying to be compassionate. But it's a gradual process, because again, compassion implies type of suffering, but with love. No, I suffer, I empathize with your shortcoming, and somehow that melts my heart, because I'm willing to how to say to get out of my own ego-like perspective and enter into your experience and connect with that and try to do something about that. So that takes time and energy, and in the beginning we may not have full capacity of projecting that in every direction. So we have to start somewhere. And at the same time we have to understand something, which is as my Guru Maharaj will say, there is no perfect community here. I don't saying that to be lazy and okay, let everything be destroyed, but do not go to the point of expecting a Golok standard on planet Earth. That won't happen. So the only perfect community, he will say, is Golok Vrindavan, Golok Navadvip. There you have perfect community. Temple president is loving, the temple commander is inspiring, and everything works perfectly, and everyone wants to wash the dishes and whatever the case. No? Relationships, communication, and so on. So I say this because sometimes we may like get too much concern about creating something in a way that it may not happen. Today I was speaking with one devotee who wrote to me. He had some problem with one temple president, and he was kind of doing catharsis with me, like, okay, all the things that the temple president did to him, and I understood the point. It was understandable. I'm not criticizing that, but of course, at the end, the conclusion was okay. But how much you can change that person? How much you can change the situation? And how much you can change yourself? I mean, how much you are doing all that you can to change yourself before speaking about what the other person did wrong or not. So instead of getting an anxiety because the temple person did this or that, first reply to yourself the question, have I done my homework to the fullest degree, and I have done all that it's in my capacity to be in the proper situation? Because if I say no, and even I say no, I still look what the others say, that's a form of hypocrisy, basically, or victim consciousness. So we have a responsibility with our own selves as sadhakas. I have a commitment to myself as sadhaka in any given situation. First of all, I have to be what Prabhupada said, strict with myself and merciful with others. But first I have to be strict with myself. Strict, I do not mean paranoid. Again, understand the idea, please. It's not like, it's in a sustainable way. Am I giving all that I should give, or I'm just taking some extra coins in my pocket? Who knows for what? No? And generally, that's the cause of our discouragement in many moments in our practice, that we are not giving all that we could give, and we are taking something there, and who knows for what? Some laziness there. But if you give that, that will make the difference. And when you give that part of yourself, those things that were disturbing you are no longer disturbing. Not because the other person has changed, maybe, but because you have changed. So again, there are so many things going on in the community, in the world, but there are so many things that has to be harmonized in ourselves. You know? So I will take always this stance that, yeah, we can spend all our life pointing all the things that have to be changed in my mission, in my temple, in my family, in my this, in my country, in my society, all these layers of, but why not begin here at home? No? All the things that have to be changed in myself. And only then I will point in a real compassionate way. And so I will make that emphasis. I mean, real compassion will come again. As much as you are strict with yourself, you can be compassionate with others. If you're not strict with yourself, there's no real compassion. It's just superficial, sentimental, whatever, something. So, and I know this is not easy, and this is not comfort zone. I mean, I'm looking at the face of you all. Do not forget that part. And none of you is smiling at this point. But it's okay. It's a serious thing, and we should have introspection and ask on a daily basis: am I giving myself all that I can give myself to this ideal, or I'm saving something for some other thing separate from the ideal? Again, it doesn't have to be neurosis, but it doesn't have to be hypocrisy either. So some middle point, and and the more we take commitment for ourselves, we will be able to be compassionate and deal with others in a real way, in a real compassionate way. Because sometimes in the name of compassion, you are just like promoting uh, mediocrity or conformism or things like this. No, oh no, I want to be compassionate. Come, I will help you, and you are actually not helping anyone. Maybe you are just making the person remain in there. Like, I don't want to put myself as an example because I'm not, but in this case, for example, when this devotee was telling me, this devotee did this to me and told this to me, one, I could choose, okay, I will be superficially compassionate and say to him, oh yes, no, this temple present is terrible. I really understand you, Prabhu. I really support you. And you have my, and he may feel, oh, thank you, Maharaj. You are so loving. And it, end of the story, but there was no big change in his heart. You know? So instead of that, I say, no, let's take him out of the comfort zone. Okay, he may have done this and that. I don't know him. I cannot tell you. But are you doing your homework? Unfortunately, he became like, oh, that's what I needed to hear. Thank you. So I'm happy that he appreciated my point, because I mean, I took the risk. The other person may say, like, what are you saying, Maharaj? I mean, he's the bad guy. I'm just a victim here. But the point is, if you want to play the victim consciousness is the exact opposite to Krishna consciousness. So you're choosing which game to play. Krishna consciousness, victim consciousness. The two of them cannot go together. Like with the car in the two different directions, and crash is about to happen. So yeah, I will say that, because yeah, there's emphasis, compassion, and saving the world and so much, but one, strictly speaking, it's harder to save yourself, and it's more difficult. Sometimes in the name of saving the world, you're just being evasive with your own personal growth. And you can save the world as much as you yourself have saved. I mean, you can enlighten others as much as you are enlightened. So there's no way out of that. So strictly speaking, it's much more complex to save yourself. And saving yourself is not a selfish idea. Our idea of salvation, which is Prem, is totally selfless. So where, for example, Prahlad Maharaj in the Bhagavatam prays, uh, I don't want to go to the mountains like those people who go and seek their own selfish salvation. He's not speaking there about someone like Gorky Shordas Babaji. He's not speaking about bhaktas. He's speaking about jnanis who look kaivalyam, mukti, in that type of mukti, that type of salvation. But if a devotee is, for example, a bhajananandi, because sometimes this mistake is there in devotee. Oh, he's a bhajananandi. No, he's not compassionate. He's not preaching. He's selfish. But if you're a real bhajananandi, you cannot be selfish, because your bhajan is not for yourself. I mean, you are offering that to someone. No, and that's totally self. And it's generally much more difficult to do than preaching. That's a famous example when Prabhupada, which was Guru Kripa Maharaj at that time, he told Prabhupada, okay, I want to do bhajan. I want to be bhajananandi. So Prabhupada said, okay, try. Like implying it may not work. So he tried for some days, some weeks, but at one point, in the words of Guru Maharaj, he started to get a little bit like nervous because, oh, again, the same dal, again, the same rice. There's no variety. Like realizing I have to be seated all day and chanting only, but that was you wanted. So, but finding, okay, I need something more. So he came back to Prabhupada and say, I cannot do it. It's too much. I need to do something else apart from just sitting and chanting, doing bhajan. Prabhupada said, no problem. Go, continue preaching. It's okay, great. And in 10 years, try again. No, like implying, that's not a bad thing. No, that's not Maya necessarily. But that requires certain purification of the chitta and certain adhikar for just sitting and doing bhajan. That's not so cheap. If someone is doing that, that's not selfishness. That's a point that is important to understand. And by preaching, that's a very glorious thing, very nice thing, but also we can use that as an evasive method to our deeper bhajan. That can happen, so we have to be careful also. But in the name of compassion and saving the world, we are not doing the necessary to saving ourselves first. So that requires introspection, and each one has to resolve that with their own pillow at night. No? So some ideas in that connection. I hope that helps. Okay, if there are any other questions, we may continue tomorrow. I already extended myself a little bit, so we will finish here. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Sadgoswami Prabhu ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gaur Bhakta-vrinda ki jai, Gaur Preman, Vancha Kalpatarubhyasta Kripa Sindhubhyaiva Patithanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Gaur Haribo.